They say Torenza Prison doesn't exist. No records. No coordinates. No visitors. But one woman swore she spent 7 years inside it, and her story was never supposed to be heard. When investigators tracked her claims, every lead vanished. Every witness recanted. Still, she remembered every hallway, every guard, every scream. And when she drew the prison from memory, the blueprint matched a facility that was officially destroyed 30 years ago. This is the woman from Torenza, the story of a prison the world tried to erase. The woman's name was Elena Marquez, and when authorities first found her, she had no ID, no history, and no explanation for where she'd been. She appeared one morning on a rural highway outside Sonora, Mexico, barefoot, malnourished, and wrapped in a torn blanket marked with faded letters. TZA Correctional. At first, local police assumed she was delusional, another lost patient from a mental facility. But when doctors examined her, they found scars around her wrists and ankles consistent with long-term restraint, burn marks along her shoulders, and surgical incisions that didn't match any hospital record. When questioned, Elena barely spoke. Only after days of silence did she whisper 4 words. "I was inside Torenza." There was no record of any prison by that name. No listing in state or federal archives. No satellite imagery, no official documents. Torenza did not exist, at least, not anymore. But Elena's story was too detailed to ignore. She described a facility deep in the mountains, surrounded by thick forest, accessible only through a single unmarked tunnel. No sunlight. No clocks. The guards, she said, wore uniforms without insignias. No names. No numbers. Just black. She remembered being kept in an underground block she called the Red Corridor, a series of concrete cells lit by a single red emergency bulb that never turned off. The smell of disinfectant. The sound of dripping pipes. And every night, the same voice echoing through the vents. "You don't exist here." When investigators tried to trace her, they hit wall after wall. Her fingerprints didn't match any database. Her DNA produced a no-record result. Even her birth certificate, forged. It was as if Elena Marquez had been erased from the system. But her memories were precise. She drew a map of the facility, complete with angles, turns, and cell counts. She marked the location of a central elevator she said never went up, only down. At first, it sounded impossible until analysts compared her sketches to declassified blueprints from a 1980s government project known as T-47, a covert containment site supposedly dismantled in 1993. The layouts matched perfectly. When news of her drawings reached journalists, a few independent investigators reopened the T-47 archives. Most of the files were redacted, but one report caught attention. Torenza Zone Alpha, Psychological Compliance Program. It mentioned long-term human containment and behavioral reconditioning, but offered no names, no dates, no explanations. A reporter from El Universal, Carlos Vega, began following the case. He met with Elena at a private clinic. She told him she was abducted in 2011 while crossing into Sonora after taking a bus from Guadalajara. She remembered a van with tinted windows, a needle in her neck, and waking up in a cement cell. They said we were experiments, she told Vega. They said Torenza was the last wall between the government and chaos. Vega recorded his interviews, 3 hours of footage that never aired. Days later, he vanished. His car was found burned outside Hermosillo. His hard drives missing. The clinic treating Elena was raided 2 weeks later by unidentified men claiming to be federal investigators. All medical records disappeared. And Elena? Gone. No one saw her leave. No one saw her again. But a month later, a package arrived at a newsroom in Mexico City. No return address. Inside, a flash drive containing digital scans of Vega's notes, photographs of Elena's sketches, and one chilling image. A concrete hallway illuminated by a red light. The file name, Torenza Red.jpg. Analysts who examined it said the photo metadata dated back to 2006, nearly 5 years before Elena claimed she was captured. Who took it? And why was it still on an active server inside a government network? Investigators traced the metadata to a defunct security contractor called Vanguardia Systems, once hired for special containment projects across Mexico and Central America. The company dissolved in 1994, the same year the government claimed Torenza was demolished. Every record from Vanguardia ended with the same initials, TZA. That same mark was printed on the blanket Elena wore when she was found. When a retired prison architect, Arturo Núñez, was shown the drawings, he went pale. He said the design was based on an experimental facility commissioned by the Ministry of Defense in the late 1980s, one designed for psychological isolation. He'd heard rumors that it was repurposed in the 2000s for unregistered detainees. It wasn't a prison, he said. It was a place to make people forget. The deeper investigators dug, the stranger it got. Satellite images showed dense forests in the coordinates Elena described. But in infrared scans, faint outlines of concrete foundations appeared. Heat signatures. Geometric symmetry. As if something was still active underground. But when drone operators flew close, the signals jammed. Every flight ended with total communication loss. One final detail haunted everyone who read her files. Elena claimed the guards sometimes wore mirrored masks, helmets with reflective visors. She said they didn't speak, only nodded. And one night, during a routine inspection, she saw her own face reflected back at her. Only older. They told me, she whispered, I'd already been here before. That line, I'd already been here before, became the key to unraveling what Torenza might have truly been. A psychological experiment? A secret prison? Or something darker, a place where time, identity, and memory weren't just broken, but reprogrammed. Whatever it was, the government called it a hoax. But those who looked too closely ended up missing, discredited, or dead. And yet, the coordinates Elena gave still existed. Somewhere deep in Sonora's mountains, where the map turns white. 2 months after Elena Marquez vanished, a journalist named Lucia Ortega received an encrypted email from an unknown sender. Attached was a file labeled Torenza_archive_2 and a GPS coordinate deep in the Sierra Madre Mountains. The message contained only 5 words. She was telling the truth. At first, Lucia thought it was a hoax, another ghost story floating through Mexico's underground news circles. But when she opened the file, she saw what looked like surveillance footage, dim, gray video clips showing a long corridor lined with iron doors. A single red bulb flickered overhead. No sound. No timestamp. Just the faint outline of TZA-4B etched into the wall. Lucia's editor refused to publish anything without verification. So, she did what any reckless reporter driven by truth would do, she went alone. The coordinates led her hours north of Hermosillo, through terrain no map officially charted. Her GPS failed repeatedly, rerouting itself to blank spaces. Locals in nearby villages refused to speak of the mountains. One old man only muttered, "People who go to Torenza don't come back." After 2 days of hiking, she found a tunnel carved into the rock, sealed by a rusted steel door with a faded government insignia, Propiedad Federal. The lock was broken. And when she entered, the air smelled of dust, rust, and something faintly chemical. Her flashlight flickered over what looked like a forgotten checkpoint, empty desks, overturned chairs, an old security monitor still humming with static. On the wall hung a peeling sign. Unidad TZA, Zona Roja. Lucia recorded everything on her camera. Her footage later became the only surviving visual record of the site. Down a hallway, she found cells, small, windowless, lined with rusted restraints bolted into the floor. Each door had a number, and every 5th cell had the same marking scratched into the wall. Infinity, the infinity symbol. As she moved deeper, faint dripping echoed through the pipes above. Somewhere beyond the walls, a generator still hummed. Then she found a control room. Inside were stacks of paper logs labeled behavioral phase units. Dates ran from 1987 to 2012, 2 decades after the site was supposedly shut down. The logs listed patient numbers, not names. Most had the same notes. Non-compliant. Subject reclassified. Memory fragmentation successful. Lucia flipped through hundreds of pages until one entry froze her. Subject 47A, Marquez, E. Last entry dated, 2018. That was the year Elena was found. The deeper Lucia went, the stranger it got. She found an old operating chamber, the ceiling lined with surgical lights, and a faded observation mirror cracked down the middle. Underneath, an empty gurney. Beside it, a tray of instruments still wrapped in sterile paper. Too recent to be abandoned for decades. She began taking photos, but her camera screen glitched, static interference, like an invisible signal pulsing through the air. When she pulled out her phone, it showed NO service. Seconds later, the flashlight began to dim. Then, faintly, from somewhere down the hall. A voice. It was faint, echoing, like someone calling through a vent. She followed it, trembling, until she reached a sealed elevator door. The same kind Elena had described. It never went up, only down. The elevator panel was dead, but a service hatch above was open. Lucia climbed through into a crawlspace, camera in hand. What she saw below made her stop breathing. A vast underground chamber, hundreds of meters wide, lined with cages and containment pods. Floodlights illuminated areas where the power still flickered. Some cages were open. Others still locked, tagged with stickers labeled decommissioned. And at the far end stood a glass observation booth with the emblem Vanguardia Systems/TZA still visible under layers of dust. The empire Elena described, the prison that shouldn't exist, was real. But before Lucia could descend, a noise echoed behind her, heavy boots. Voices in Spanish. Men shouting, "Aquí, arriba!" Flashlights swept across the ceiling. She froze as beams of light passed beneath her. At least 3 men, armed, moving through the corridor she'd just explored. One spoke into a radio. "Sector clear. Wipe the footage." Lucia crawled back toward the tunnel, heart pounding, recording every second she could. She reached the surface just before sunrise, lungs burning, covered in dust. She never saw the men again. But her footage survived, uploaded to the cloud hours before her phone signal died for good. Days later, the tunnel entrance was collapsed by a controlled explosion. Locals reported hearing a deep echo like thunder under the mountain. Government officials denied any such operation, claiming it was mining activity. But satellite images captured the truth. A plume of dust rising from coordinates matching TZA Site Alpha. 3 weeks after her return, Lucia uploaded a documentary teaser titled Torenza, the Hidden Facility. It was viewed 2.3 million times in 48 hours. Then, her channel went dark. All videos removed. Her domain, deregistered. Her email, deactivated. Only fragments of the footage remain, mirrored across hidden corners of the web. The final frame shows Lucia's camera pointing at the collapsed tunnel, her voice trembling. "If you're watching this, it's still there." Investigators later analyzed the surviving clips. Thermal imaging within the video revealed faint heat signatures underground, suggesting active systems still operating miles beneath the mountain. Whatever Torenza was, it wasn't abandoned. Weeks after Lucia Ortega's disappearance, a cyber forensics group called Project Echo began digging into the fragments of her footage that had been archived online. Hidden in the metadata was a name that hadn't appeared anywhere before, Vanguardia Biosystems, Division 47A. It wasn't the same defense contractor that built the original Torenza facility, it was a successor, founded just 4 years earlier under a new registration number. Every clue pointed to one fact. Torenza never closed. It just changed its name. Project Echo traced encrypted file transfers from a dormant government domain to a private server in Geneva. Inside were digital maintenance reports, written in Spanish and English, with timestamps only weeks old. Each report referenced something called neurocompliance pods. And every file was tagged with a familiar prefix, TZA. They had rebuilt the prison, not as a place of punishment, but as a laboratory. A test ground for controlling the human mind through isolation, light, and suggestion. Investigators found more financial transactions routed through shell companies tied to health tech firms. The invoices were masked as clinical research, sleep cycle data, and memory calibration. But buried in the text were coded lines referencing voluntary detainees. Only, none of the names on the list existed in any database. One of Project Echo's analysts, Diego Herrera, went public. He released a single statement to a local paper. They learned to erase people like files. Not kill them, delete them. Within a week, Diego vanished. His apartment was found empty except for one item left on the table. A hand-drawn infinity symbol, just like the ones etched in the Torenza cells. The few journalists still following the case believed there was a pattern. Every investigator who got close either disappeared or discredited themselves within days. Their computers wiped, their phones dead, their families pressured into silence. But there was one exception. Dr. Elena Cruz, a neuroscientist who once worked for Vanguardia before it dissolved. She agreed to speak anonymously in a podcast that was quickly pulled offline. Her voice, distorted through filters, said, "Torenza was not a prison. It was a calibration site. They were testing how far a mind could be pushed before it stops being human." She claimed the experiments combined sensory deprivation with neural feedback, long exposure to red light, controlled sound frequencies, and hypnotic repetition. It wasn't torture for punishment, it was torture for programming. Government officials dismissed her claims, labeling them internet fiction. But satellite data didn't lie. Infrared scans over the old Torenza coordinates showed heat signatures appearing every night between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. And seismic monitors picked up rhythmic vibrations, like the pattern of generators cycling underground. Each pulse lasted exactly 7 minutes. Then silence. Every night. In early 2025, an independent drone pilot named Mauro Rivas decided to fly over the restricted zone again. He used a modified drone with thermal sensors and offline storage. The footage he captured lasted only 67 seconds before his connection jammed. But in those 67 seconds, you could see it. A steel vent built into the mountainside. Hot air rising. And painted faintly beside it, the same 3 letters, TZA. When Mauro uploaded the clip, it spread across social media like wildfire. Then, one by one, the links disappeared. Copyright strikes. National security notices. Accounts deleted. By morning, only screenshots remained. That's when whispers of the Torenza protocol surfaced, a document allegedly leaked from within the Ministry of Defense itself. It described a containment program for psychological stabilization of non-cooperative detainees. The document claimed the facility had been reactivated in 2015 under new jurisdiction. The signature at the bottom belonged to a minister who died in a car crash the following year. Those who analyzed the file noticed something chilling. Each paragraph ended with a repeating phrase in small print, barely visible unless you zoomed in. Observation without witness. Correction without record. That was Torenza's true motto. Even today, no one knows how many people went through the Torenza program. Some say it was used on political dissidents. Others claim it was an international black site shared between intelligence agencies. Whatever the truth, its shadow stretches beyond Mexico. Former contractors in Chile, Panama, and even Spain reported receiving similar blueprints marked with the infinity symbol. Each project had the same layout, circular corridors, central elevator, red lighting. Torenza wasn't a single place. It was a template. In her last recorded message before she vanished, Dr. Cruz left a warning. They didn't build Torenza to imprison people. They built it to study how to make people disappear while still alive. She paused, her voice breaking. If you ever hear silence where there should be noise, leave. That's how it starts. Months later, hikers in Sonora reported seeing flickers of red light deep within the mountains on overcast nights, faint, pulsing, rhythmic. Locals say it's the wind catching minerals. But those who've been near the area describe something else. The sound of a door closing, echoing underground. Like metal remembering its purpose. They said Torenza was destroyed 30 years ago. They said no one ever came out alive. But the woman who escaped remembered every scream. And the blueprints she drew still match something alive beneath the earth. Some prisons hold people. Others hold secrets. And Torenza? Torenza holds both.